I was sitting in a glass conference room at my new job, my hands still sticky from coffee, when the receptionist handed me a thick court file. The header didn't say lawsuit. It read, "Petition to disinherit" next to my parents' names. They were asking a judge to legally declare I was no longer their child, as if family was a contract they could void. They thought they were destroying my reputation, but they had just exposed a secret my father could never deny. My name is Valerie Brooks, and until 48 minutes ago, I was simply the new senior operations manager at Stone Harbor Live Logistics. I was 34 years old, debt-free, and finally breathing air that did not smell like diesel fumes and parental disappointment. I was sitting in the glass-walled conference room on the 4th floor, the one overlooking the gray Chicago skyline, reviewing a route optimization strategy for a 12-truck convoy heading to Nashville. Then the receptionist, a sweet girl named Sarah, who was too young to understand the violence that can be carried in a manila envelope, knocked on the glass. She opened the door and slid a thick stack of documents across the mahogany table. "You have been served," she whispered, looking like she wanted to apologize for the weather. I looked at the cover sheet. The first thing I saw was the seal of the circuit court. The second thing I saw was the plaintiff line Robert Brooks and Eleanor Brooks versus Valerie Brooks, my parents. The third thing I saw was the cause of action. It was not just a lawsuit. It was an annihilation attempt. Count 1, misappropriation of trade secrets. Count 2, tortious interference with business relations. Count 3, defamation of character. And then, clipped to the back, distinct from the civil complaint, was a separate filing that made the blood drain from my face and pool somewhere in the soles of my heels. It was a petition to disinherit. They were requesting a declaratory judgment to remove me as a beneficiary of the Brooks Family Trust and to legally memorialize a complete severance of the familial bond. They wanted a judge to sign a piece of paper that said, "In the eyes of the law and the eyes of my father, I was no longer their daughter. I did not cry. Crying is an inefficiency. Crying is for people who have the luxury of being surprised. I was not surprised by their cruelty, only by their tactical stupidity." I stared at the papers. The timestamp on the filing showed it had been submitted at 9 in the morning on Tuesday. They had timed this. They knew I had a quarterly review with the Stone Harbor Board on Friday. This was not just about the family trust or the money. This was a shock and awe campaign designed to make me look unstable to my new employers. They wanted me to crumble. They wanted me to run out of this glass room, screaming into my cell phone, creating a scene that would prove I was too volatile to manage high-stakes logistics. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold. I flipped to page 4, paragraph 12. The defendant, Valerie Brooks, did maliciously and with intent to harm, solicit key personnel, and steal proprietary routing algorithms belonging to Brasswood Exhibit Freight. I almost laughed. Algorithms. My father, Robert Brooks, thought the cloud was something that ruined a golf game. He wrote inventory lists on the back of diner napkins. There were no algorithms at Brasswood until I built them, code by code, night after sleepless night, while he was asleep and my brother, Riley, was out spending the company credit card on bottle service. I closed the folder. I did not run. I did not scream. I walked back to my desk, placed the file in my locked drawer, and finished the Nashville routing schedule. I worked for another 4 hours. I answered 6 emails. I approved 3 invoices. I was a machine. That is what they had trained me to be. After all, a tractor, a forklift, a thing that works until it breaks. But my mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating the trajectory of this missile. Who wrote this for them? My father was too arrogant to hire a shark. He liked lawyers who nodded. This language was aggressive. It smelled of desperation, and the petition to disinherit. That was the nuclear option. You do not fire a nuke unless you are terrified of a ground war. Why were they so afraid of me? I had left. I had walked away. I had given them the kingdom. The memory hit me then, sharp as a box cutter. It was 6 years ago, a Tuesday in November. The warehouse floor at Brasswood was freezing because the heaters were broken again. I was on my knees on the concrete, restacking a pallet of trade show displays that had tipped over because the night crew was understaffed and overworked. My hands were cracked and bleeding from the dry cardboard. My father had walked by, wearing his camel hair coat, smelling of expensive cologne and a 2-hour lunch. He stopped, looking down at me as I struggled with a crate that weighed 60 pounds. "You are lucky, Valerie," he had said. His voice was smooth, lacking any jagged edges of empathy. "You are lucky to have a job at home. Any other company would have fired you for your attitude, but we keep you, because we are family." He stepped over my legs and kept walking. He had planted that seed in my head for a decade. The idea that I was unemployable, that was difficult, that my obsession with protocol and safety and checklists was a personality defect, not a professional asset. He needed me to believe I was small so that he could feel tall, but I wasn't small anymore. And now, I was going to court. 72 hours later, I was sitting in the office of Elias Vance, a litigator who charged $450 an hour and wore shoes that cost more than my first car. He had the kind of face that didn't move much when he spoke. He tossed the file onto his desk. "They filed in the circuit court," Elias said. Leaning back, "This is public record. They didn't seek arbitration. They didn't send a cease and desist first. They went straight to the docket." "What does that tell you?" I asked. I sat with my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. I was wearing my charcoal suit, the one I wore when I needed to fire someone. "It tells me they are arrogant," Elias said, "or they are stupid. Usually, in family business disputes, people want to hide the dirty laundry. Your parents are hanging the laundry on the front lawn and setting it on fire. They want to destroy my reputation." I said, "They know the logistics world is small. If I am branded as a thief who steals trade secrets, I will never work in operations again." "Correct," Elias said. "But there is another angle. The disinheritance petition. It is theatrical. Judges hate this stuff. It looks vindictive. Why would they risk looking like villains? Because they think I will fold." I said, "They think I am still the girl who is afraid of disappointing her father. They think if they hit me hard enough, I will come crawling back to Brasswood, begging for forgiveness, ready to fix whatever mess they have made since I left." Elias looked at me. "Is there a mess?" I didn't answer immediately. I thought about the systems I had built, the delicate architecture of vendor relationships, the just-in-time delivery schedules that relied on precise timing, the safety protocols that kept the insurance premiums low. I had taken all the institutional knowledge with me, not on paper, but in my head. Without me, Brasswood was just a warehouse full of stuff and a family full of egos. "They are drowning," I said softly, "and they need a scapegoat to explain to the bank why the ship is sinking." Elias nodded. He tapped the file. "Well, they chose court, which means they assume you have nothing to fire back with. They think this is a one-way shooting range." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Let's show them it is a war zone." The morning of the hearing was gray and sleeting, typical for the Midwest in late October. The courthouse was a fortress of limestone and misery. I walked through the metal detectors, the sound of my heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat on the marble floor. Click, click, click. It sounded like a countdown. I entered the courtroom. It was smaller than it looks on television. Smelling of floor wax and old paper, they were already there at the plaintiff's table. My mother, Eleanor, was wearing a soft beige sweater set and a string of pearls. She had a tissue clutched in her hand, twisting it around her fingers. She looked fragile. She looked like the victim of a cruel, ungrateful child. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. This was the woman who once told me to work through a fever of 102 degrees because the shipment had to go out. My father, Robert, sat next to her. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the judge's empty chair. He sat with his chest puffed out, his jaw set. He looked like a man who was inconvenienced by the fact that he had to explain himself to anyone. He looked like a king who had been forced to visit the DMV, and there was Riley, my brother, the golden boy. He was sitting in the gallery behind them, looking at his phone. He wore a suit that was too tight in the shoulders, trying to look like an executive. When he saw me, he quickly looked down. tapping furiously on his screen. He looked nervous. Good. I walked to the defense table and sat down next to Elias. I did not look at my parents. I opened my laptop. I placed a single, thin notepad on the table. My father turned his head. Our eyes met. There was no warmth. There was only the cold, hard stare of a boss looking at a subordinate who had stepped out of line. He gave me a slight nod. A smirk, really. It was the look he used to give me when I asked for a raise. A look that said, "You are delusional. All rise," the bailiff shouted. The Honorable Judge Kincaid swept in. She was a woman in her 60s with glasses perched on the end of her nose and an expression that suggested she had absolutely no patience for drama. "We are here for the matter of Brooks versus Brooks," she said, shuffling papers. "Motion for preliminary injunction and petition for declaratory judgment. My father's lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who looked like he billed by the syllable, stood up. Your Honor," he began, his voice booming. "We are here today because the defendant, the daughter of these heartbroken parents, has engaged in a systematic campaign to destroy the family business. She has stolen confidential client lists. She has sabotaged their operations, and she has done so with malice. My clients are forced, with heavy hearts, to ask this court to intervene and to sever the legal ties that bind them to a daughter who has betrayed them." My mother dabbed her eyes with the tissue. "I saw a juror in the box, no. There was no jury today. Just the gallery." I saw the court reporter glance at my mother with sympathy. It was a good story. It was a powerful story. Mr. Sterling called his first witness, Robert Brooks. My father stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked to the witness stand with the confidence of a man who owned the building. He placed his left hand on the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?" the clerk asked. "I do," my father said. His voice was deep, resonant, the voice of a patriarch. He sat down. "Mr. Brooks," his lawyer asked, "did your daughter, Valerie, have access to the sensitive financial and operational data of Brasswood Exhibit Freight?" "Yes," my father said. "We trusted her. We gave her the keys to the kingdom. And did she use that access to transfer proprietary assets to her own possession before quitting without notice?" "Yes," he said. He looked straight at me. "She took the core processes that make our business work. She claimed them as her own. She left us crippled." I sat perfectly still. My heart rate did not jump, because as he spoke, as he wove this tapestry of lies, I was thinking about the red folder in my briefcase. He was lying. That was expected. But he was lying about ownership. He was claiming he built the systems. He was claiming he owned the processes. He had just testified, under oath, that he was the sole architect of the business's success, and that I was merely a thief. He had no idea. He had no idea that when you build a system, you leave a fingerprint. He had no idea that every spreadsheet, every route optimization code, every safety protocol he was claiming as his own had a digital signature. But more importantly, he had just opened the door to the one thing he had fought to keep hidden for 30 years. By claiming I had stolen the business, he had made the ownership structure of the business a central issue of the trial. He thought he was burying me. I looked at Elias. Elias made a small note on his legal pad. "Perjury trap set." My father looked at the judge, his face the picture of righteous indignation. "She is no daughter of mine," he said, his voice breaking theatrically. A true child would not destroy her father's legacy. I watched his hand resting on the wooden railing of the witness stand, the same hand that used to sign my birthday cards with "From Dad," written by his secretary. "You are right, Dad," I thought, staring at him until he flickered his gaze away. "I am not your daughter anymore. I am the plaintiff in the counterclaim you don't even know is coming. And you just swore on a Bible to a lie that is going to cost you a lot more than a lawsuit. You just gave me permission to tell the truth. People often mistake logistics for transportation. They think it is just trucks moving from point A to point B on a map. But anyone who has actually stood on a concrete loading dock at 4 a.m, when the wind is cutting through your thermal layers and a driver is screaming that his load is overweight, knows the truth. Logistics is not about movement, it is about friction. It is about the thousand invisible things that want to go wrong and the sheer brute force of will required to make them go right. I learned this lesson not in a classroom, but on the receiving dock of Brasswood exhibit freight. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, but my father insisted I start on the floor. He called it building character. I called it free labor. My day did not start with coffee and emails. It started with the screech of metal roll-up doors and the smell of exhaust. I was the first one in. Usually around 4:30 or 5 in the morning. My job was to audit the inbound freight from the overnight haulers, while my friends from university were posting pictures of their entry-level marketing jobs and happy hours. I was wearing steel-toed boots and a high-visibility vest that was 2 sizes too big, climbing into the back of 53-foot trailers to check for load shifts. I learned to drive a forklift before I learned how to properly navigate a corporate spreadsheet. I learned the difference between a pallet jack and a reach truck, and I learned that if you do not respect the weight of a crate, it will crush you. I treated that warehouse like a laboratory. I carried a clipboard everywhere. I recorded how long it took to offload a trade show booth. I timed the pick and pack process. I realized early on that Brasswood was bleeding money through inefficiency. My father, Robert, was the face of the company. He was excellent at buying steak dinners for clients and promising them the moon. He would stand in a client's office and swear that their massive, multi-ton exhibit would arrive in Orlando by Friday morning, no matter what. He would shake hands, flash his winning smile, and leave the room feeling like a hero. He never thought about how it would get there. He never considered that the driver was out of service hours, or that there was a blizzard in the Rockies, or that the exhibit crates were 6 inches too tall for a standard door. He just sold the promise. I was the one who kept the promise. I was the invisible engine room. While Dad was golfing with the VP of marketing for a major tech firm, I was on the phone with third-party carriers, negotiating spot rates to get a hotshot driver to drive through the night. I created the systems. Before me, Brasswood ran on sticky notes and shouting. I built the inventory tracking system from scratch. I color-coded the routing lanes. I implemented the safety checklists that cut our worker compensation claims by 40% in 2 years. I lived in the details. I knew the weight limits of every bridge on I-80. I knew which drivers could be trusted with fragile electronics and which ones smoked in the cab. I was a machine. I made myself indispensable because I thought that was how you earned respect in this family. Then there was Riley. Riley was 3 years younger than me. If I was the engine, Riley was the hood ornament. He was charming. I will give him that. He had Dad's smile and Mom's ability to play the victim if anyone critiqued him. Riley did not do 4 a.m. shifts. Riley rolled in at 9:30, usually holding a latte, wearing designer sneakers that had never touched a warehouse floor. He spent his days in the front office. Networking, he managed the company's social media pages, which mostly meant posting photos of our trucks with inspirational quotes. He called himself a visionary. I remember one specific Tuesday. We had a crisis. A driver had blown a tire outside of Des Moines, and he was carrying the main stage truss for a massive medical convention in Chicago. The show opened in 12 hours. If that truss didn't arrive, the client would sue us for breach of contract, and the reputation of Brasswood would be incinerated. I was in the dispatch office, surrounded by 3 phones, sweat running down my back. I was coordinating a crane service in Iowa to transfer the load to a rescue truck I had sourced from a local competitor by calling in a personal favor. I was shouting coordinates, wiring money for emergency repairs, and mentally calculating the drive time at 80 miles per hour. Riley walked in. He leaned against the door frame, looking at his phone. "Hey, Val," he said, popping gum. "Do we have any good shots of the new wrap trailers I want to update the Instagram story?" I looked at him. I had a phone pressed to my ear, listening to a mechanic swear about a stripped lug nut. Not now. "Riley," I snapped. "We are about to lose the MedTech account." He shrugged. "You always stress too much. Dad says everything is under control." Dad was currently at a wine tasting. I saved the account. The truck rolled into the Chicago dock at 3 in the morning. 2 hours before setup began. I was there to unload it myself because I didn't trust the night foreman to handle it delicately enough. When the client arrived at 8 a.m., they saw a pristine stage. They never knew I had aged 5 years in a single night to make it happen. My father took the credit. He sent an email to the company praising our team's dedication, but he attached a photo of himself shaking hands with the client. I realized then that hard work alone wasn't enough. I needed credentials. I needed to prove to them that I wasn't just Robert's daughter who helps out in the back. I wanted to be seen as an executive. So, I went back to school. I enrolled in a Master of Science in Supply Chain Management program. I did it at night, for 2 years. My life was a blur of exhausting brutality. I would work a 10-hour shift at Brasswood, dealing with unions and customs brokers, and then drive to campus for 3 hours of lectures on global logistics and operations theory. Then I would drive home, eat a cold sandwich over the sink, study until 2 a.m., and wake up at 5 to do it all over again. I was validating my existence. I was putting a diploma on the wall that said I was an expert. It destroyed my health. My stomach was a constant knot of acid. I developed ulcers. I stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. My skin was pale, and I had dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I lost weight because I forgot to eat. One Sunday dinner, my mother looked at me across the roast chicken. "You look tired." "Valerie," she said, pouring gravy, "you should smile more. You look so severe lately. I am working and studying." "Mom," I said, my voice tight, "I am managing the entire Midwest division. I am tired." "Oh, you are strong," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You have always been the strong one. You are like a draft horse. You can take it. A draft horse, not a daughter, a beast of burden." When I graduated with honors. I didn't get a party. Dad said they were too busy with the busy season to celebrate. I framed my degree and hung it in my small, windowless office behind the dispatch desk. Then, 6 months ago, I decided it was time. I prepared a presentation. I treated it like a business proposal. I printed out charts showing the efficiency gains I had implemented. I showed the year-over-year reduction in fuel costs due to my routing adjustments. I showed the client retention rates for the accounts I personally managed. I had the data. I had the leverage. I asked for a meeting with Dad. I walked into his office, the big corner one with the leather sofa and the view of the parking lot. I sat down and slid the binder across his desk. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I have been effectively running the operations department for 4 years. I have a master's degree. The industry standard for a director of operations is 30% higher than what I'm currently making. I am asking for a title change to director of operations and a salary adjustment to match the market rate." He didn't open the binder. He didn't look at the charts where I had highlighted the hundreds of thousands of dollars I had saved him. He leaned back in his chair and took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, letting out a long sigh, as if I had just asked him to donate a kidney. "Valerie," he said, "you are looking at this all wrong. I am looking at the numbers." I said, "This is a family business," he said, his voice dropping to that patronizing tone he used when I was a teenager. "We do not do corporate nonsense here. We pitch in. You are lucky to have a secure job here. Do you know how many people are unemployed right now? You have a roof over your head. You have a paycheck." I felt a cold heat rising in my chest. I am not asking for charity. I am asking to be paid for the job I am doing. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "You are doing a job, yes, and you are doing it fine. But you lack vision. Valerie, you are a worker. You are great at the gritty stuff, but you are not executive material. You don't have the polish." He pushed the binder back to me. It slid across the polished wood and hung over the edge, threatening to fall. "Be patient," he said. "Your time will come. Right now. Just focus on the fleet maintenance. I heard truck number 42 has a transmission issue." I walked out of that office with the binder tucked under my arm. I felt hollowed out. It wasn't the money. It was the absolute refusal to see me. He looked at me and saw a mechanic. He saw a safety net. He did not see a leader. 48 hours later, an email went out to the entire company. Subject: special announcement, all staff meeting at 2 p.m. I assumed it was about a new client, or maybe a change in insurance policies. I stood on the warehouse floor with the rest of the staff. The drivers were there, scuffing their boots. The packers were leaning against the conveyor belts. My father stood on a makeshift stage made of pallets. He was beaming. He loved a crowd. Beside him stood Riley. Riley was wearing a brand new navy suit, a pocket square tucked neatly in his breast pocket. He looked like he was posing for a magazine cover. "Team," my father boomed, his voice echoing off the corrugated metal ceiling. "We are entering a new era at Brasswood. We need fresh energy. We need to look to the future." He put an arm around Riley's shoulders. "I am proud to announce that, effective immediately, Riley is stepping into the newly created role of Director of Customer Experience and Growth." My stomach dropped. I felt the blood drain from my extremities. "Riley will be spearheading our brand strategy and leading our client relations," Dad continued. "And to help him achieve this, he will be receiving a full executive compensation package, including the new company lease vehicle and an expense account to help him wine and dine our best partners." There was a pause, and then the staff started clapping. It was polite applause, mostly, but to me, it sounded like thunder. I did the math in my head instantly. Director level, executive package. That meant Riley, who had never negotiated a freight rate in his life, who couldn't tell you the difference between a bill of lading and a packing slip, was now making double my salary. He was getting the car. He was getting the title. He was getting the respect I had spent 10 years bleeding for. Riley stepped forward, flashing a dazzling, practiced smile. "Thanks, Dad, and thanks to all of you. I am really excited to take us to the next level. We are going to disrupt this industry." He pumped his fist. The applause grew a little louder. I stood there, near the loading dock door where the cold wind was seeping in. I was wearing my steel-toed boots and a polo shirt with a grease stain on the hem from checking a forklift earlier that morning. I looked at my father. He was glowing with pride, looking at his son, the golden boy, the reflection of his own ego. He didn't even glance at me. I looked at Riley. He caught my eye and gave me a little wink, a conspiratorial wink, as if to say, "Isn't this great?" It wasn't a promotion. It was a statement. It was a declaration of value. My father had looked at my years of 70-hour weeks, my master's degree, my saved contracts, my ulcers, and my loyalty, and he had valued it at 0. He looked at Riley's smile and valued it at a premium. I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. I stood there and clapped. I clapped slowly, rhythmically. My hands stung with the impact, but inside, something had snapped. It was the final cable holding up the bridge. The engine had just been turned off, and they had no idea that without the engine, the vehicle doesn't move. They were about to find out exactly what happens when the tractor stops pulling. The resignation letter was exactly 3 sentences long. I did not write a manifesto. I did not detail the years of unpaid overtime or the humiliation of the staff meeting. I did not mention Riley's new car or my father's blindness. I simply stated that I was resigning from my position as operations manager, that my final day would be 2 weeks from today, and that I wished Brasswood Exhibit Freight continued success. I printed it on standard white paper, signed it with a blue ballpoint pen, and placed it on my father's desk at 7:55 in the morning. I wanted him to see it before he had his first coffee. The reaction was immediate and loud. My father called me into his office at 8:10. He did not look at the letter. He looked at me with a face flushed red, a mix of confusion and fury. "This is ridiculous. Valerie," he said, tossing the paper aside, "is this a negotiation tactic? Because if you want a 5% raise, just ask for it. Do not play games with me. I am not playing games." "Dad," I said. My voice was flat. I had practiced this tone in the mirror. It was the tone of a vendor declining a bad contract. "I have accepted another offer." He laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Another offer. Who would hire you? You have only ever worked here. You do not know how the real world works. They will eat you alive." I just looked at him. I did not defend myself. I did not tell him that I had been running the real world for him for a decade. I will serve out my 2 weeks. I said, I will prepare all necessary documentation for the transition. He waved his hand dismissively. Fine, go, pout for 2 weeks. You will be back begging for your desk by Christmas. My mother called me an hour later. She was crying. How can you do this to us? She sobbed. We are a family. You are abandoning your brother just when he is starting his new role. He needs you, Valerie. He has an executive title. Mom, I said, staring at a spreadsheet on my screen. I am sure he can figure it out. Riley sent me a text message at lunch. Stop being dramatic. You are making Mom cry. Don't be childish. I did not reply. I deleted the message. For the next 10 business days, I became a ghost in the machine. I did not engage in water cooler gossip. I did not complain. I dedicated every minute of my remaining 80 hours to the most comprehensive handover in the history of logistics. I wanted to leave a corpse so clean that no autopsy could ever blame me for the death. I created a master operations manual. It was 200 pages long. I documented every single active account. I wrote down the personal cell phone numbers of the dock managers in Las Vegas and Orlando. I created a flowchart for the billing cycle. I listed the maintenance quirks of every truck in the fleet, which ones needed oil every 3,000 miles, which ones had faulty lift gates. I recorded the passwords to the routing software. I wrote out the step-by-step protocols for hazardous material handling. I left nothing to memory. I put it all in 3 heavy binders, labeled clearly, and stacked them on the corner of my desk. This was not generosity. This was defense. I knew that the moment things started to break, they would blame me. They would say I sabotaged the system. They would say I hid information. These binders were my evidence that I had given them the keys to the kingdom. If they crashed the car, it was because they didn't know how to drive, not because I stole the steering wheel. The warehouse staff sensed the shift. The air in the loading dock changed. Miller, the head of the fleet drivers, cornered me near the vending machines on my second-to-last day. He was a big man, a Vietnam veteran who rarely spoke more than 2 words at a time. Is it true, he asked, holding a black coffee? Yes, I said. Tomorrow is my last day. He looked at the floor, then back at me. Who is going to approve the route changes when the weather turns? Riley is the director of growth. I said, it will be under his purview. Miller snorted, a sound of pure derision. Riley thinks a snow chain is something you wear around your neck. I didn't smile. I couldn't afford to be seen undermining management. I just nodded. The manuals are on my desk. Miller, everything is in there. Where are you going? He asked. I hesitated. I knew my contract did not have a non-compete clause. My father had never bothered to have me sign one because he never imagined I would leave. But I still wanted to be careful. Stone Harbor Live Logistics, I said quietly. Miller raised his eyebrows. The big guys. They do the stadium tours. I nodded. Take me with you, he said. I looked him in the eye. I cannot do that. Miller, I cannot solicit staff. He nodded slowly. I know. But if I happen to apply there, and they happen to ask you if I can drive, I will tell the truth. I said, that you are the best driver in the Midwest. He tipped his imaginary hat. Good enough for me. My last day was a Friday. I placed my badge on my desk next to the binders. I wiped my computer hard drive of any personal data. I left the office at 5 o'clock exactly. No one said goodbye. My father was in a meeting with a supplier. Riley was out early for happy hour networking. My mother was at her bridge club. I walked out to the parking lot, got into my 6-year-old sedan, and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The following Monday, I started at Stone Harbor. The difference was disorienting. The office was quiet. The carpet was clean. There was an HR department that gave me a handbook and walked me through a benefits package that included 4 weeks of paid vacation, full dental, and a matching retirement plan. My new boss, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, took me to lunch. Do you know why we hired you? Valerie, she asked, as we waited for our salads. Because you have a gap in mid-level management, I suggested. She shook her head. Because we lost 3 bids to Brasswood in the last 2 years. And when we analyzed why, We realized it wasn't their pricing, it was their execution. Their turnaround times were statistically improbable for a company of that size. We knew someone was working miracles in the back office. We wanted the miracle worker. I felt a lump in my throat. For 10 years, my father had told me I was lucky to be employed. Here, a stranger was telling me I was the secret weapon. My salary was $115,000 a year. That was 40% more than I was making at Brasswood, plus bonuses. I settled into the work. It was demanding, but it was logical. At Stone Harbor, if a truck broke down, there was a protocol. There was a budget for repairs. I didn't have to beg my father for cash to buy new tires. I didn't have to fix Riley's mistakes. I felt lighter. My stomach ulcers began to heal. I started sleeping 6 hours a night, but silence has a way of carrying sound. Even though I had cut contact, the echoes of Brasswood's collapse reached me. It started slowly. 2 weeks after I left, I got a LinkedIn notification. Miller had updated his profile. He was now driving for a pharmaceutical distributor. He hadn't come to Stone Harbor, but he had left Brasswood. Then, the customer service manager, a woman named Brenda, who had been with my parents for 15 years, sent me a request to connect. I accepted. She messaged me immediately. "It is a zoo here." She wrote, "Riley tried to change the routing software to a cheaper version because he wanted to use the budget for a launch party. The system crashed yesterday. We lost track of 4 trailers. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen. Then came the client defections. Stone Harbor picked up a mid-sized expo contract that had been with Brasswood for 5 years. The client told our sales rep that they were leaving because their last shipment arrived 24 hours late and the new contact person was unresponsive. Riley. I felt a cold satisfaction. It wasn't joy. It was the satisfaction of a mathematician seeing an equation balance out. Input equals output. Remove the labor, and the product fails. I was finally free. I was building a life. I looked at apartments in the city, places with floor-to-ceiling windows and doormen. I was ready to leave the suburbs and the shadow of my family behind forever. I decided to get pre-approved for a mortgage. I wanted everything in order. I wanted to buy a place that was mine, with my name on the deed, paid for by money that I had earned where I was respected. I filled out the application online one evening, sitting on my secondhand couch with a glass of wine. I felt like an adult. I felt powerful. The next morning, I got a call from the mortgage broker, Ms. Brooks. He said, "We have a slight issue with your application." My heart skipped a beat. Issue? I have a perfect credit score. I have 0 debt. Well, that is not exactly what the report says, he said. His voice was hesitant. I opened my laptop and logged into the credit monitoring site. I hadn't checked it in 6 months because I never carried balances. I scanned the summary. My score had dropped. It had plummeted by 150 points. I clicked on the details. There, listed under Outstanding Liabilities, was a commercial business loan. It was a massive sum, $500,000. The status was listed as delinquent, 60 days past due. The debtor was Brasswood Exhibit Freight. I frowned, confusion clouding my vision. That was my father's company. Why was it on my personal credit report? I clicked deeper into the file to see the guarantor details. My breath stopped. There, listed as the primary personal guarantor for the $500,000 loan, was my name. Valerie Brooks. I sat there, frozen. I had never signed for a business loan. I had never been an owner. I had never been an officer of the company with the authority to guarantee debt. I remembered the papers my father would sometimes shove under my nose when I was working a double shift, exhausted and bleary-eyed. "Just sign this. Val, it's for the new health insurance policy. Sign this. It's for the 401k update. Sign this. It's a compliance form for the DOT." He had used me. He hadn't just exploited my labor. He had leveraged my financial future. He had used my clean credit history to secure funding for the company because his own credit was likely shot. And now that the company was failing under Riley's incompetence, they were missing payments, and the bank wasn't coming after Robert Brooks. They were coming after me. I picked up the phone. I didn't call my father. I I didn't call my mother. I called the number of the bank listed on the credit report. "Hello," I said, my voice shaking with a rage so cold it burned. "I am looking at a loan document that I believe contains a fraudulent signature." The operator asked for my name, Valerie Brooks, I said, and then she said something that made the room spin. "Oh, Ms. Brooks, we have been trying to reach you, the other guarantor. Mr. Brooks told us to direct all collections inquiries to your address starting last month. He had redirected the debt collectors to me. He wasn't just hiding it. He was handing me the bill for the ship he was sinking." I hung up the phone. I looked at the rain hitting the window of my small apartment. I had thought resigning was the end of the war. I had thought I could just walk away and let them fail on their own. I was wrong. This wasn't a job dispute anymore. This was a crime scene, and I was the one holding the bloody knife. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Forensic Accountants Chicago and Business Litigation Attorneys. I wasn't going to be the daughter anymore. I was going to be the witness for the prosecution. The discovery of the loan was not a moment of panic. Panic is a chaotic reaction, a flailing of limbs when you fall into deep water. This was not panic. This was a forensic audit. I sat at my kitchen table, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the apartment, and I engaged the part of my brain that used to track missing cargo across 3 state lines. I had a debt of $500,000 attached to my name. It was a commercial line of credit taken out by Brasswood Exhibit Freight 3 years ago. According to the credit report, I was the co-borrower and guarantor. I did not scream. I opened my personal archive. I am a hoarder of data. It is a side effect of the industry. In logistics, if you cannot prove a delivery time, you pay the fine. So, I kept everything. I had cloud backups of my calendars, my travel logs, my credit card receipts, and my emails going back 7 years. I looked at the date on the loan origination, June 12th, 3 years ago. I opened my calendar for that year. I cross-referenced it with my expense reports. On June 12th, 3 years ago, I was not sitting in a bank office in Chicago signing loan documents. I was in a muddy field outside of Detroit, overseeing the loadout of an automotive trade show that had been hit by a thunderstorm. I had receipts for a rental car in Michigan. I had a hotel bill from a Holiday Inn Express near the convention center. I had a time-stamped email I sent to my father at 2 p.m. complaining about a forklift driver. I was 300 miles away when my hand supposedly signed that paper. I picked up the phone again the next morning. I called the bank's commercial lending department. I navigated the phone tree until I got a human being, a loan officer named Mr. Henderson. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice clipped and professional. "I am disputing the validity of a signature on the Brasswood commercial loan. I was physically in another state on the date of execution." "Ms. Brooks," Henderson said, sounding bored, "I am looking at the digital scan of the document right now. It is a wet signature. It was notarized. It matches the signature card we have on file for you." My stomach turned over. Notarized. Who was the notary? I asked. He hesitated. "I cannot release that information over the phone, but the file is complete. If the company is in default, as a guarantor, you are liable." I hung up. A notary stamp meant someone had verified my identity. Someone had looked at a driver's license, looked at a woman who claimed to be me, and stamped that paper, or someone I knew had simply stamped it without looking at all. I looked at the signature card comment. I realized then that my father had access to every document I had ever signed since I was 18. My employment contracts, my insurance forms, my tax documents. My signature was not a secret to him. It was a reusable asset. While I was digging through the strata of my own financial burial, Brasswood was busy digging its own grave. The information came to me in fragments, mostly from Miller, the driver who had left, and Brenda, who was still trapped there. Riley had officially taken over operations. His first move as director of growth was to rebrand. He didn't like the old Brasswood logo. He thought it looked dated. So, he spent $40,000 on a new visual identity, sleek, modern, minimalist. He ordered new vinyl wraps for the entire fleet of 20 trucks. To pay for it, He cut the preventive maintenance budget by 60%. He stopped the weekly tire rotations. He canceled the contract with the third-party mechanics who did the deep engine diagnostics. It is fine. He apparently told the staff, "The trucks are running great. We need to look good to get the big clients." It worked for 3 months. Then, the entropy set in. The crash happened during the preparations for the Midwest Tech Summit. It was a massive contract, one that my father had held for 15 years. It was the bread and butter of the company's third quarter. The job required 18 trucks to move 200,000 pounds of sensitive servers and display screens from a warehouse in Indianapolis to the convention center in Chicago. It was a just-in-time delivery. The setup crew had a 4-hour window. 2 of the Brasswood trucks blew their turbochargers on the highway. They were sitting on the side of I-65 smoking. Riley didn't have a backup plan. He didn't have a relationship with a rescue carrier because he had insulted the local brokers by demanding lower rates 2 months prior. The equipment arrived 6 hours late. The union labor at the convention center had already gone home because their shift was over. The client had to pay triple overtime to get a new crew in. The setup was unfinished when the doors opened. The client, a Fortune 500 technology firm, did not just complain. They triggered the penalty clauses in the contract. They refused to pay the shipping invoice, and they threatened to sue for damages to their brand reputation. My phone rang on a Tuesday night at 9 o'clock. It was my father. I stared at the screen. I let it ring 4 times. I wanted to see if he would leave a voicemail. He didn't. He called again immediately. I picked up. "Hello, Robert," I said. I had stopped calling him Dad. "Valerie," he said. He sounded breathless. He sounded old. "We have a situation." "I know," I said. "The tech summit. I heard the load-in was a disaster. People talk too much." He snapped. "Look, it was a minor mechanical failure. Bad luck. But we are a little backed up now because we have to reshuffle the fleet. Riley is overwhelmed. He has the flu. Riley didn't have the flu. Riley had a competence deficiency. I need you to come in," he said. "Just for a few weeks. Just to smooth out the dispatch board and get the drivers back in line. They listen to you. We need to stabilize the accounts before the holiday rush." I stood in my living room, looking out at the city lights. He wasn't asking how I was. He wasn't apologizing for the loan. He was asking me to come back and clean up the mess he had allowed his golden boy to make. "I can do that," I said calmly. I could hear the relief in his exhale. Good. You can start tomorrow. I will tell the gate guard to let you in. I am a consultant now." "Robert," I interrupted. "My rate is $250 an hour. Minimum retainer of 100 hours. Paid up front. And I require a signed contract indemnifying me from any previous operational liabilities." There was a silence on the line, a heavy, stunned silence. What he whispered, "I am a professional." I said, "You want my expertise? You buy it, just like you bought the new truck wraps." "You ungrateful little," he sputtered. "I gave you life. I put clothes on your back. You would charge your own father. You charged me $500,000 for a loan I didn't sign." I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "So yes, I am charging you." He hung up. The line went dead. I stood there, shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally treating him like what he was, a bad business partner. 2 days later, the retaliation arrived. I was at my desk at Stone Harbor, analyzing a fuel surcharge report, when the receptionist called me. "Valerie, there is a courier here for you. He says you have to sign for it." I walked to the front. The courier handed me a thick envelope. It wasn't a personal letter. It was from a law firm, Sterling Associates, my father's lawyers. I opened it in the lobby. "Cease and desist and demand for preservation of evidence." The letter was a masterpiece of fiction. It accused me of misappropriating trade secrets and stealing proprietary client data prior to my resignation. It claimed that the recent client defections from Brasswood to Stone Harbor were the direct result of my illicit use of confidential information. It demanded that I return all stolen data and threatened immediate legal action if I continued to contact Brasswood clients. They were accusing me of corporate espionage. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just a family spat anymore. This was a direct attack on my employability. If Stone Harbor thought I was dirty, if they thought I brought legal trouble with me, they would cut me loose. Valerie. I turned. Sarah, my boss, was standing behind me. She was looking at the letterhead on the envelope. "We need to talk," she said. "HR just got an email from your former employer's legal counsel." I walked into her office. The HR director was there. They looked serious. "Valerie," Sarah said, sitting on the edge of her desk, "we like you. You're doing great work. But we received a notice alleging that you are using stolen proprietary data to solicit clients. That is a serious accusation. Stone Harbor cannot be seen as a party to trade secret theft." I sat down. I placed my hands on my knees to stop them from trembling. "It is a lie," I said. "I did not take a single file. I built those systems, yes, but I left them there. The clients are leaving Brasswood because their service has collapsed, not because I called them." Sarah looked at me. She wanted to believe me. I could see it. But she was a VP. She had to protect the company. "You need to resolve this." "Valerie," she said, "quickly. We cannot have a cloud like this hanging over the department. If this goes to court and we get dragged in." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I walked out of the office feeling the weight of the building pressing down on me. My father knew exactly what he was doing. He knew he couldn't force me back to the warehouse, so he was trying to burn down the bridge I was standing on. He wanted to make me unemployable again. He wanted me desperate. I left work early. I went straight to Elias Vance's office. I threw the cease and desist letter on his desk. "They are trying to get me fired," I said. Elias read the letter. He didn't look worried. He looked interested. "This is a tactic," he said. "A standard bully tactic. They are trying to starve you out. They know the loan fraud is a ticking time bomb, so they are trying to destroy your credibility before you can detonate it." I feel pretty destroyed. "Elias," I said, "my boss is looking at me like I am a liability." Elias leaned forward. "Valerie, listen to me. People don't file these kinds of aggressive, baseless motions unless they are terrified. They are trying to make you afraid. They want you to panic and settle. They want you to agree to pay the loan in exchange for them dropping the trade secret suit. It is a leverage play." He took off his glasses. "They want you to be the scared little girl who does what she is told," he said. "Are you?" I thought about the warehouse floor at 4 a.m. I thought about the 3 years of night school. I thought about the fake signature on the bank document and Riley's smirk as he crashed the company I built. "No," I said. "Good," Elias said. "Then stop acting like a defendant." He pulled a fresh legal pad toward him. "They want to talk about trade secrets. Fine. Let's talk about the secret of how that company actually runs. Let's talk about the bank fraud. Let's talk about the labor violations you told me about." He looked up at me, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "They want you to be afraid, Valerie. So, I suggest we find the thing they are afraid of, and we put it on the table." "What do they fear?" I asked. "The truth," Elias said, "and the IRS, and the bank examiners, and you." I looked at the window, at the gray Chicago sky. I wasn't shaking anymore. If they wanted a war over paper, I was going to give them one. I knew every piece of paper in that building. I knew where the bodies were buried because I was the one who had been forced to dig the graves. "Let's file," I said. Elias picked up his pen. "What are we filing? Everything," I said. "The legal term is severance. In medical terms, it means cutting off a limb to save the body. In the Circuit Court of Cook County, it meant my parents were trying to cut me out of existence to save their pride." The second filing had landed with a heavy thud on the judge's bench. It was titled, "Petition to Disinherit and Terminate Beneficiary Status." It ran parallel to the civil lawsuit about trade secrets, but it was far more personal. It was a document designed to legally erase me from the history of the Brooks family. They weren't just suing a former employee. They were trying to unmake a daughter. I sat at the defense table, my hands clasped over the cold surface of my laptop. Elias Vance sat beside me, his posture relaxed, like a predator waiting for the prey to stumble. Across the aisle, my family sat in a tableau of aggrieved virtue. Mr. Sterling, their lawyer, stood up to address Judge Kincaid. He held the petition as if it were a holy text. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with practiced sorrow, "we have filed this petition because the defendant's actions go beyond mere corporate malfeasance. She is engaged in conduct so egregious, so fundamentally opposed to the values of the Brooks family, that my clients can no longer recognize her as their kin." He gestured to my mother. Eleanor was weeping again. She had perfected a silent, trembling cry that looked devastating from the bench. She dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, looking small and broken. "She has abandoned us," my mother whispered loudly enough for the court reporter to catch. "She left us when we were vulnerable. She took our people. She tried to break her father's heart. I watched her, feeling a strange detachment. My mother didn't talk like that. My mother spoke in passive-aggressive comments about my hair or my lack of a husband. The phrase, fundamentally opposed to the values, was not her vocabulary. That was Sterling's script. She was performing a role. And the role was the betrayed matriarch. In the written complaint, they painted a picture of me that was almost impressive in its villainy. They claimed I had conspired to dissolve the workforce. They claimed I had poisoned the well with clients. They argued that my resignation was a calculated act of sabotage designed to cripple the company so I could swoop in and buy it for pennies on the dollar. It was a fantasy, but in a courtroom, a fantasy is just a story waiting to be disproven. Judge Kincaid looked over her glasses at the paperwork. She did not look moved by the tears. She looked like a woman who had seen 1,000 family tragedies and found most of them to be about money. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, "you are asking for a declaratory judgment to remove Ms. Brooks from the family trust. That is a significant request. The trust is an irrevocable instrument, is it not?" "It is, Your Honor," Sterling said, "but there are clauses for gross misconduct and actions detrimental to the estate. We argue that stealing the company's intellectual property constitutes an attack on the estate itself." Judge Kincaid turned her gaze to my father. Robert Brooks was sitting up straight, his chest puffed out. He nodded vigorously. "She is an employee, Your Honor," my father blurted out, unable to keep his silence. "She forgot her place. She thinks because she organized a few trucks. She owns the place. She has no rights to my legacy if she tries to destroy it." Elias leaned over to me. "He just opened the door," he whispered. Elias stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket with a slow, deliberate movement. "Your Honor," Elias said, his voice smooth and deep, "the plaintiff claims that Valerie Brooks was merely an employee with no ownership stake, and therefore her departure was a betrayal rather than a business decision. They claim she has no rights." He paused, letting the silence hang in the room for 3 seconds. "However," Elias continued, "if we are to determine whether she has rights to the estate or the business, we must first establish what the business actually is and who actually owns it." My father scowled. He crossed his arms. "To that end," Elias said, handing a document to the clerk, "the defense moves for immediate and full discovery. We are requesting the production of the original articles of incorporation for Brasswood Exhibit Freight. We are requesting the minutes of all board meetings for the last 5 years. We are requesting the original wet signature copies of all commercial loan agreements currently active with the bank. And we are requesting the signature cards for all authorized officers of the company." My father's face changed. It went from arrogant red to a pale, sickly gray in the span of a single breath. "Mr. Sterling shot up. Objection. Your Honor, this is a fishing expedition. These documents contain sensitive trade secrets and confidential financial data. The defendant is working for a direct competitor. We cannot hand over the blueprints of the business to a rival. Elias didn't back down." He smiled, a cold, shark-like smile. "Your Honor," Elias said, "they are accusing my client of stealing the business. We are simply asking them to prove that it is their business to steal. If Mr. Brooks is the sole owner and operator as he claims, then these documents will vindicate him. Why would he hide the proof of his own empire?" Judge Kincaid looked at my father. She saw the sweat beading on his forehead. She saw the way his hands were gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. A judge knows when a man is afraid. The objection is overruled, Judge Kincaid said, banging her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Mr. Sterling, you will produce the requested documents within 7 days. If your client claims ownership to disinherit his daughter, he must prove the structure of that ownership. My father slumped in his chair. He looked at Riley. Riley was staring at the floor. He hadn't looked at me once during the entire hearing. He was chewing on his thumbnail, a habit he had when he was a child, and had broken something expensive. Riley knew. I looked at my brother. The director of growth? The boy in the expensive suit? He knew about the loans. He knew about the signatures. He might not have forged them himself. He didn't have the patience for paperwork, but he knew they existed. And now, he was realizing that the disinherit strategy had just backfired. They wanted to cut me off, but in doing so, they had invited a spotlight into the dark corners where they hid their fraud. The bailiff dismissed the court for the day. As we packed up our bags, my mother walked past the divider. She stopped near me. Her eyes were dry now. The performance was over. "Why are you doing this?" "Valerie," she hissed. Her voice was venomous. "Do you want to kill your father? The stress will kill him. Is that what you want? To dance on his grave?" I zipped up my laptop bag. I stood up and looked her in the eye. I was taller than her in my heels. I didn't file the lawsuit. "Mother," I said calmly, "you did. You wanted to go to court. Welcome to court." She recoiled, as if I had slapped her. She turned and hurried after my father, who was already storming out of the double doors, yelling at Mr. Sterling. Riley lingered for a second. He looked at me, his eyes wide and panicked. "Val," he started, his voice cracking. Dad just did what he had to do to keep the lights on. You know how the banks are." I looked at him. "Did you know my name was on the $500,000 note?" "Riley." I asked. He flinched. He didn't answer. He turned and ran after our parents. 3 days later, I was in Elias's office. It was late, past 8 in the evening. The city outside was a grid of amber lights. A courier had delivered 4 bankers' boxes of documents. This was the Discovery production. My father had tried to stall, but the judge had threatened to hold him in contempt. So, he had sent everything, hoping to bury us in paper. He didn't know that I could read paper faster than he could generate it. Elias and I had been sifting through the files for 6 hours. We had pizza boxes stacked in the corner. We found it. It wasn't just one document. It was a pattern. We found the corporate resolution from 4 years ago, authorizing the expansion of the warehouse. The resolution required a unanimous vote of the shareholders. According to the minutes, the shareholders were Robert Brooks and Valerie Brooks. I held the paper in my hand. There was my signature at the bottom. It was a good forgery, but the loop on the V was too wide. I never wrote it like that. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was in the bank files. Elias pulled a thick file from the second box. He laid it out on the conference table. "Here is the loan application for the $500,000 credit line," Elias said. I looked at it. The date matched the one I had found on my credit report. The one when I was in Michigan. But there was more. "Look at the collateral," Elias said, pointing to page 12. I leaned in. Under secured assets, it listed the warehouse building, the fleet, and the Brooks Family Trust. My breath caught in my throat. They didn't just use my name to guarantee the loan. They pledged the family trust, the very trust they were now petitioning to kick me out of as collateral for the business debt. My father had leveraged the entire family inheritance to keep his failing company afloat, used my name to co-sign for it, and was now trying to legally remove me from the trust so that when the bank inevitably foreclosed, I would have no legal standing to stop them from taking the money. He wasn't disinheriting me to punish me. He was disinheriting me to hide the fact that the inheritance was already gone. He was robbing the trust to pay for the business, and he needed me out of the way so I wouldn't audit the books. "Jesus," I whispered, "it's a shell game. The whole thing is a shell game." Elias sat back. He took a sip of his lukewarm water. "He is trapped," Elias said. "If he admits you are an owner/guarantor, he validates your claim to the business and destroys his trade secret suit, because you can't steal from yourself. If he denies you are an owner, he has to explain to the bank and the court why your signature is on these federal loan documents. Elias looked at me. His eyes were dark and serious. Valerie, we have enough right here to end this. We can file a motion for summary judgment. We can show the fraud. The judge will dismiss their suit and likely refer your father to the district attorney for bank fraud and perjury. He could go to prison. At the very least, Brasswood will be liquidated. He paused. Or we can play it out. We can let him take the stand one more time. We can let him swear under oath that he is the sole owner. And then, we can introduce this evidence in open court. It won't just be a dismissal. It will be a public execution of his reputation. He tapped the table. So, the question is yours. Do you want a clean counterattack? Do you want to settle quietly now that we have the gun? Or do you want to let him walk into the trap and destroy him right there in front of the judge? I looked at the forged signature on the paper. I looked at the list of assets he had gambled away. I thought about the petition to disinherit. I thought about him telling me I was lucky to have a job. I thought about him willing to ruin my career at Stone Harbor just to keep me silent. He had tried to erase me. He had tried to take my name. I looked at Elias. I don't want a settlement, I said. My voice was steady. I want him to say it. I want him to stand there and tell the lie one last time. And then I want to show him exactly who owns that signature. Elias nodded slowly. A smile touched his lips. Then we go to trial, he said. The devil is never in the details. The devil is in the definitions. We sat in the conference room, surrounded by the smell of stale pizza and the hum of the ventilation system. The city of Chicago was asleep, but the paper trail on the table was screaming. We had moved past the discovery of the loan itself and were now dissecting the anatomy of the fraud. Elias held up a document titled Credit Risk Assessment from the bank's internal files. It was part of the subpoenaed package. It was dated 4 years ago. Look at this, Elias said, pointing to the paragraph summarized in bold. I leaned in. The text was dry, banker speak, but the meaning was violent. Primary applicant Robert Brooks deemed high risk due to previous bankruptcy discharge in 2008 and current debt-to-income ratio exceeding 60%. Loan approval contingent upon co-signer with Tier 1 credit rating and unencumbered assets. I stared at the words. 2008. I was in college then. I knew things were tight, but he had told me it was market fluctuations. He had declared bankruptcy. He had hidden that from me for my entire adult life. And the debt ratio, 60%. He had been drowning long before I left. He couldn't get the money. I said, the realization settling in my stomach like cold lead. He was toxic to the lenders. Exactly, Elias said. He was radioactive. No bank would touch him for a commercial line of credit of that size. He needed a shield. He needed someone who looked clean on paper. He needed me. I whispered. I had always prided myself on my financial hygiene. I paid my credit cards in full every month. I had a perfect repayment history on my student loans. I was the exact opposite of him. I was the Tier 1 candidate the bank required. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how he got me on the paper. I picked up the commercial guarantee agreement. I looked at the signature on the last page. In the previous days, I had assumed it was a straight forgery, like someone tracing my name. But now, looking at the high-resolution scan under the bright fluorescent light, I felt a sickening jolt of recognition. The loop on the V, the sharp strike of the B. It was my signature. It was my hand. But I had never knowingly signed a loan. I closed my eyes, forcing my brain to travel back in time. I used the date on the document February 12th, 4 years ago. Where was I? I checked my digital calendar. February 12th. The Great Lakes freeze. I remembered it instantly. It was a nightmare week. Temperatures had dropped to 20 degrees below zero. The diesel fuel in the trucks was gelling. We had 6 drivers stranded in Minnesota. I had been living at the office for 3 days straight, sleeping on a cot in the break room, surviving on vending machine coffee and adrenaline. I remembered my father walking into the dispatch room. It was late, maybe 10 at night. I was on the phone with a mechanic. Val, he had said, dropping a stack of papers on my desk. I need you to sign off on the new workman's compensation renewals and the updated payroll insurance. The broker needs them by morning or the drivers aren't covered. I remembered rubbing my eyes. I remembered the headache pounding behind my temples. Is it standard, I had asked? Same as last year. He had said, just sign the tabs. I handled the rest. I trusted him. He was my father. He was the CEO. I flipped to the sticky tabs he had placed, signed my name, and went back to saving his fleet from the ice. I opened my eyes and looked at Elias. He slipped it in the stack. I said, my voice trembling. He sandwiched a $500,000 personal guarantee between insurance forms when I hadn't slept in 48 hours. He weaponized my exhaustion. Elias nodded grimly. It is called fraud in the inducement. It makes the contract voidable, but it also proves intent to deceive. But there was more. The rabbit hole went deeper. Elias flipped to the next document. It was a corporate resolution of authority. This was the document that told the bank who actually had the power to run the company. Read the ownership breakdown, Elias said. I looked at the table on page 2. Shareholder Robert Brooks, interest 49%. Shareholder Eleanor Brooks, interest 2%. Managing partner, majority controller, Valerie Brooks, interest 49% plus executive veto power. I stopped breathing. To get the loan, the bank must have demanded that the clean person me have controlling interest. They wouldn't lend to a company run by a bankrupt man. They would only lend to a company run by the person with the 800 credit score. So, on paper, in the eyes of the bank and the federal government, my father had transferred controlling authority to me 4 years ago. He didn't just make me a guarantor, he made me the boss. I own it, I said. The words tasted like ash. I own the company. Elias smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a hunting smile. Technically, yes. According to the documents he submitted to a federally insured bank, you are the majority controller with veto power over all financial decisions. He leaned back, tenting his fingers. Here's the beauty of it. Valerie, in the lawsuit filed last week, the one where they are suing you for trade secrets your father swore under oath in the verified complaint that he is the sole owner and that you were merely a disgruntled employee. I saw the trap. It was magnificent in its geometry. If he tells the judge that these bank documents are real, I said, then he admits that I am the owner, and an owner cannot steal trade secrets from herself. The lawsuit is dismissed. Correct, Elias said. And if he claims he is the sole owner, as he did in the lawsuit, then he has to admit that the bank documents are fake. I finished. Which means he committed bank fraud. That is a federal crime. That is 5 to 30 years in prison. He has to choose, Elias said. He can lose the lawsuit, or he can go to jail. I looked at the papers. For years, he had made me feel small. He had made me feel like a cog in his machine. But all this time, on the paperwork that actually mattered, he had needed my name to survive. He was the parasite. I was the host. We kept digging. The sheer volume of the deception was staggering. We found the minutes from the board meeting where Riley was appointed Director of Growth. The document was dated 6 months ago. It bore my signature as Secretary. I looked at the metadata of the digital file they had foolishly included on the flash drive. File created. October 24th, 3 days ago. They had forged the minutes after filing the lawsuit to cover their tracks. They were trying to retroactively justify Riley's salary to the court. And the signature, it was a copy-paste job. A pixelated clone of the signature I had used on my resignation letter. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound in the quiet office. What Elias asked. They are so bad at this, I said. They are so used to me fixing their mistakes that they don't even know how to commit a crime properly. They didn't scrub the metadata. They didn't check the resolution of the image. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard in Elias's office. I needed to see it visually. I drew a timeline. 2008, Dad goes bankrupt. 2019, Dad needs money. Uses my credit. 2020, Dad transfers control to me on paper to satisfy the bank. 2023 I resign. Dad sues me claiming I am nobody. The timeline was a noose, and he had tied it himself. Elias watched me. We have enough for a summary judgment, he said again. We can end this on Tuesday. No, I said. I turned to look at him. I thought about the petition to disinherit. I thought about my mother crying in the courtroom, performing her grief while knowing full well they were trying to frame me. I thought about Riley taking the car and the credit while I took the risk. If we file for summary judgment now, it happens on paper. I said, the judge reads it in her chambers. She dismisses the case. Maybe she refers it to the prosecutor. Maybe she doesn't. It is quiet. I walked back to the table and picked up the loan agreement. I ran my thumb over the words, primary guarantor. I want him to take the stand, I said. I want him to look at me. I want to ask him, in open court, if he owns the company. I want him to say yes, and then I want to hand him this piece of paper. Elias nodded slowly. He understood. This wasn't about legal victory anymore. It was about exorcism. You realize, Elias said softly, that if we do this, if we expose the bank fraud in open court, the bank will call the loan immediately, Brasswood will collapse, the assets will be seized. Your inheritance, the one they are trying to take from you, will be zero. I looked at the city lights. I thought about my new life at Stone Harbor. I thought about the paycheck I earned with my own sweat, not my father's lies. I thought about the freedom of owing nothing to anyone. Let it burn, I said. I sat back down and opened my laptop. I am going to draft the cross-examination questions. I told Elias. I pulled up my old email archives. I found the email from that freezing night in February. Subject insurance forms. Body val. Just sign these and leave them on my desk. Dad. I printed it. I found the email where I sent the system architecture for the routing software to my personal cloud, dated 3 years before Riley even knew what a routing table was. It proved I was the author, not the thief. I printed it. I built a stack of evidence that was 3 inches thick. Each page was a nail in the coffin of the Brasswood myth. Finally, I looked at the petition to disinherit one last time. The petitioner requests that Valerie Brooks be treated as if she predeceased the testator. They wanted me dead on paper. I looked at the bank loan where my name was the only thing keeping their world alive. I picked up a red pen and circled the words, primary guarantor. I started to laugh again. It started low in my chest and rose until my shoulders were shaking. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who walks away from a car crash without a scratch. Disinherit me, I thought. You can't disinherit the person who owns the mortgage on your life. I looked at Elias. Get the process server ready, I said. We need to subpoena the bank officer who notarized this. Henderson, Elias asked. No, I said. Henderson is just the manager. I want the notary. Look at the stamp. Elias squinted at the seal on the fake document. Jennifer Miller. I know her, I said cold. She is my father's golf buddy's daughter. She works at the branch part-time. She didn't verify my identity. She did a favor for Uncle Robert. Subpoena her. I said, drag her in. Let's see if she wants to go to prison for him, too. I closed the file. The snap of the binder rings echoed in the room. My parents wanted a courtroom drama. They wanted to strip me of my name. On Tuesday, I was going to make sure that when I left that courtroom, Brooks was a name that meant nothing to anyone in this town ever again. The 48 hours following the discovery of the bank fraud were not spent in celebration. They were spent in the trenches. If we were going to walk into court and detonate a bomb, we needed to make sure the blast radius was calculated perfectly. We needed corroboration. The documents were the gun. But I needed witnesses to load the bullets. I did not sleep. I hunted. My living room became a war room. I had a whiteboard propped up against the television, mapping out the network of Brasswood's decline. I started making calls at 6 a.m. I knew the rhythms of the industry. I knew that the people who actually did the work were awake before the sun came up. I started with Gary, the owner of a tire supply company in Gary, Indiana. He had supplied Brasswood for 20 years. He picked up on the second ring, the sound of an impact wrench whining in the background. Valerie, he asked, his voice rough. I heard you left. Place is falling apart without you. I need to ask you something. Gary, I said, and I need you to be honest because I'm going to subpoena your records anyway. He went silent. Did my father ask you to alter the dates on the invoicing for the last 2 quarters, I asked. Gary sighed. It was a long, heavy sound. Val, look, he said it was just for cash flow. He said he needed to push the expenses into the next fiscal year so the bank wouldn't pull his line of credit. He promised he would pay the late fees. Did he pay them? No, Gary said. He owes me $40,000. I wrote $40,000 on my notepad. If I call you to the stand, will you say that I asked? Val, I can't lose the contract. Even if he is slow to pay. He is 30% of my business. If you don't testify, and the bank seizes the company for fraud, you get 0 cents on the dollar. I said, if you help me, I might be able to help the creditors get priority. There was a pause. Then the sound of the impact wrench stopped. Send the subpoena, Gary said. I hung up and circled his name in green. 1 down. Next was Ken, the safety manager. This was harder. Ken was a terrified man. He was 62 years old, 3 years away from retirement, and terrified of losing his pension. He wouldn't talk on the phone. He agreed to meet me at a diner off the interstate, halfway between the warehouse and the city. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, and his hands shook as he held his coffee mug. They are going to kill someone. Val, he whispered, looking around to see if anyone was listening. Tell me, I said. Riley cut the brake inspections. Ken said, we are running trucks that are 2,000 miles over the service limit. I flagged it. I wrote the reports. I put red tags on 3 tractors last week. And Robert came down to the bay. Ken said, he tore the tags off. He told me that if I didn't sign the compliance release, he would fire me for incompetence and fight my unemployment. He said the freight had to move. I felt a cold rage stiffen my spine. This wasn't just money anymore. This was lives. Did you keep copies of the red tags, I asked? Ken nodded. I took pictures on my phone. Before he tore them up. Email them to me. I said, right now. He did. I watched the images load on my phone screen. Timestamps, geotags, proof that my father was sending 40-ton missiles down the highway with bad brakes, all while suing me for damaging the company reputation. The net was tightening, but the pressure was not just on them, it was crushing me too. At noon, I was summoned to the executive suite at Stone Harbor. Sarah, my boss, was sitting with the general counsel. The atmosphere was frigid. Valerie, the general counsel said, he did not offer me a seat. We have received another letter from your father's attorneys. They are threatening to name Stone Harbor as a co-defendant in the trade secrets lawsuit. They claim you are utilizing our servers to house their stolen data. I looked him in the eye. That is a lie. It doesn't matter if it is a lie. Valerie, Sarah said. Her voice was not unkind, but it was firm. It matters that it is a liability. We are a public company. We cannot have a federal trade secret lawsuit attached to our operations director. The board is asking questions. She leaned forward. We support you. Val, we know you are good, but we cannot carry this baggage forever. You have a hearing next week. I nodded. I do. You need to win, Sarah said. And you need to win decisively. If this drags on, if this becomes a media circus, we will have to sever ties with you. We cannot afford the optics. It was an ultimatum. Win or get fired. I walked back to my desk. The stakes had just doubled. I wasn't just fighting for my past. I was fighting for my future. Then, at 8 in the evening, my phone buzzed. It was a text message. Riley, can we meet? Please, don't tell Dad. I stared at the screen. My first instinct was to ignore it. It could be a trap. They could be trying to record me saying something compromising, but curiosity is a powerful force, and underneath the anger, a small, stupid part of me still remembered teaching him how to tie his shoes. The Starbucks on 4th, 30 minutes. I will be recording the conversation. Riley. Okay. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat in a corner with a clear view of the door. I had my phone recording audio in my pocket. Riley walked in. He didn't look like the director of growth anymore. He was wearing a hoodie, hood up, and jeans. He looked exhausted. He looked like a kid who had crashed his dad's car and didn't know how to go home. He bought a black coffee and sat down opposite me. He didn't look at my face. He looked at his hands. "You look tired." I said, "The bank called the office today." He said, "They wanted to speak to you. Dad told them you were unavailable." He yelled at the loan officer. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. I let it weigh on him. "Val," he said. Looking up, his eyes were red-rimmed. "Is it true?" About the loan, I raised an eyebrow. "You tell me." "Riley, you are the director." "I didn't know," he said. The words rushed out of him. "I swear to God." "Val, I didn't know he used your name. I thought he had an investor. He told me he had a silent partner." I laughed. A bitter, sharp sound. "A silent partner, Riley. Use your brain. Who would invest $500,000 in a company with declining revenue?" He put his head in his hands. "He is losing his mind. Val, he is screaming at everyone. He fired the dispatch manager yesterday because a driver was 5 minutes late. He is paranoid. He thinks you have spies in the building." "I do." I thought, "Why are you here?" "Riley," I asked. He took a breath. "Because he is making me lie." I leaned in. "What do you mean, the disinherit petition?" Riley said, "The stuff about you stealing clients. I didn't write that. Dad didn't write that." "Who wrote it?" I asked. "Sterling brought in a consultant." Riley said, "A guy named Marcus. He is a fixer. He told Dad that the only way to make you drop the counterclaims is to destroy you emotionally. He said we have to make you feel like you have no family left. So you will trade the lawsuit for a relationship." I stared at him. It was so clinical, so calculated. Sterling told Dad, "Hit her where she lives. Take her name away. She is proud. Break her pride, and she will sign the settlement." I felt a chill go through me. My father wasn't just angry. He was being architected. He was a puppet for a lawyer who wanted a win fee. "And you went along with it," I said. "You sat in court and watched Mom cry." Riley flinched. "Mom didn't know it was a strategy. Mom actually believes the lies. Dad told her you were planning to bankrupt us. She is scared." "Val, and you?" I asked. "I am scared too," he whispered. "If this blows up, I have nowhere to go. I can't run a company. Val, I faked it because Dad wanted me to, but I don't know what I am doing." He looked at me, pleading, "Just settle. Val, please, just sign the NDA, walk away, and let us figure it out. If you expose the loan, Dad goes to jail." "Do you really want that?" I looked at my brother. He was weak. He had always been weak because we had never allowed him to be strong. We had carried him, and now the weight was crushing him. I stood up. "I am not settling." "Riley," his face fell, "but I will give you some advice," I said. "When I call you to the stand next week, and I will call you, do not lie. If you lie to protect him, you go down with him. If you tell the truth, you might just survive." I walked out of the coffee shop. I didn't look back. I had my confirmation. The disinheritance was a psychological weapon. It wasn't real. It was leverage. And leverage works both ways. I went back to Elias's office the next morning. I played him the recording of Riley. "We can't use it," Elias said immediately. "Illinois is a two-party consent state for audio recordings. Unless he knew he was being recorded, I told him in the text message." I said, "I showed him the screenshot." Elias grinned. "You are getting good at this. But we don't need the tape." Elias continued. "The tape just confirms the strategy. The weapon is still the documents." He pulled out a new binder. "We have the vendor, Gary. We have the safety manager, Ken. And we have the bank notary, Jennifer Miller, who was served with a subpoena yesterday. She has already hired a criminal defense attorney. That means she is going to flip on your father to save herself." "It is over," Elias said. I looked at the stack of evidence. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like an amputation. The hearing was set for Tuesday. It was a status hearing that Elias had successfully converted into an evidentiary hearing regarding the preliminary injunction. We were going to ambush them. Judge Kincaid had sent a warning note to both counsels. The court expects full candor regarding the ownership structure of the entity Brasswood Exhibit Freight. Any obfuscation will be met with severe sanctions. She knew. Judges always know when something smells rotten. Elias looked at me. Valerie, he said, there is one way this plays out where you don't destroy the company completely. You could offer a settlement now. You could demand the company. Demand the company, I asked. You own it, Elias said. Force him to resign. Take control. Fire Riley. Fix it. I thought about it. I thought about the warehouse. I thought about the smell of diesel and the sound of the roll-up doors. I thought about the years I spent building it. But then I thought about Stone Harbor. I thought about Sarah, who respected me. I thought about the clean lines of my new life. No, I said, I don't want the company. It is poisoned. I want my name off the loan. I want my name restored. And I want him to admit he lied. Elias nodded. Then we go for the throat. The night before the hearing, I sat in my apartment. I didn't turn on the lights. I watched the city breathe. My phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the caller ID. Mom. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I listened to it. Valerie, please. Your father is not well. He has chest pains. If you do this, if you go back to court, you are killing him. Please, just stop. Her voice was ragged. But even now, I couldn't tell if it was real fear or if Sterling had told her to make the medical call. I deleted the message. I went to my closet and picked out my suit for tomorrow. Not charcoal this time. Navy blue, sharp, executive. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I wasn't the sister. I was the primary guarantor, and I was coming to collect. Cliff. The next morning, inside the courtroom, the air was heavy, like the atmosphere before a tornado touches down. My father looked haggard. He was sweating before the session even began. Elias leaned over to me as the bailiff announced the judge's arrival. Remember, Elias whispered, we don't have to shout. We just have to hand him the paper. When you flip that card, he destroys himself with his own mouth. I looked at my father. He glared at me, a look of pure hatred. All rise, I stood up. I felt a strange calm. Let's see who really owns the name Brooks. I thought. The motion was titled, Emergency Motion for Temporary Restraining Order and Preliminary Injunction. It sounded urgent, like I was an arsonist standing outside their warehouse with a box of matches. In reality, I was sitting at the defense table, checking my watch, wondering how many billable hours Mr. Sterling was charging my parents to embarrass them in public. This was the midterm skirmish. We were not yet at the main trial regarding the disinheritance or the fraud. This was a hearing to determine if I was such an immediate threat to Brasswood Exhibit Freight that the court needed to gag me before we even got to a jury. They wanted to ban me from contacting any past, present, or potential clients. They wanted to ban me from speaking to any former colleagues. Essentially, they wanted to make it illegal for me to exist in the logistics industry within a 500-mile radius of Chicago. Mr. Sterling stood at the podium. He was sweating slightly. He knew the judge was already skeptical after the discovery dispute, so he was dialing up the drama. Your Honor, Sterling said, his voice grave, we are bleeding. Since the defendant's departure and her subsequent employment at a direct competitor, Brasswood has seen a catastrophic loss of key accounts. We have affidavits here stating that the defendant has been aggressively soliciting our clients, using inside knowledge of our pricing models to undercut us. He pointed a finger at me. She is not just a competitor, Your Honor. She is a vindictive former insider who is systematically dismantling her family's legacy out of spite. She is motivated by greed and a desire to punish her parents for a perceived slight regarding her compensation. I sat stone still. Greed. That was rich coming from people who had leveraged my credit score to buy their lifestyle. Sterling continued. We asked the court to enjoin Ms. Brooks from any contact with the entities listed in Exhibit A and to issue a protective order preventing her from utilizing any knowledge gained during her tenure at Brasswood. Furthermore, this behavior speaks to the character issues raised in the petition to disinherit. If she is actively destroying the estate, she certainly has no claim to it. It was a clever narrative. If they could get the judge to agree I was a threat, it would validate their move to disown me. They were trying to build a legal justification for the emotional violence they were planning for the final hearing. Judge Kincaid looked at the motion. She turned to Elias. Mr. Vance. Your response? Elias stood up. He didn't use the podium. He stood next to me, a visual shield. Your Honor, Elias said calmly, the plaintiff has used a lot of adjectives: vindictive, greedy, aggressive. But they haven't used any data. They claim my client is stealing their business. We argue that they are simply losing it. Elias walked to the clerk and handed over a thin binder. We have prepared a timeline, Your Honor. We call it the timeline of operational decline. I watched my father stiffen. He hated charts. He hated anything that pinned him down to a specific moment in time. Elias continued, If you look at tab 1, you will see a list of the 6 major clients who have left Brasswood in the last 90 days. Sterling jumped up. Objection. Client lists are confidential. Overruled. Judge Kincaid said without looking up. You put the client loss at issue when you filed this motion. Counselor. Continue. Mr. Vance. Thank you, Elias said. Now, if you look at the dates, you will see that 3 of these clients terminated their contracts before my client. Ms. Brooks even started her new position at Stone Harbor. She was literally unemployed, sitting on her couch. When these accounts walked out the door, how could she have solicited them? He paused for effect. And regarding the other 3, Elias went on, we have subpoenaed the exit interview emails sent by these clients to Brasswood's management. Elias projected a slide onto the courtroom screen. It was an email from the logistics manager at a large medical supply firm. I read the text along with the room. Dear Robert, we are terminating our agreement effective immediately due to 3 consecutive missed delivery windows and a lack of communication from your dispatch team. We cannot risk our freight with a partner who does not answer the phone. Elias turned to my father. Mr. Brooks, Elias said, did Valerie Brooks make your trucks late? Did she tell your dispatch team not to answer the phone? My father's face turned a mottled purple. He leaned forward, ignoring Sterling's hand on his arm. She set us up to fail, he blurted out. She built a system that only she could run, and then she abandoned it. That is sabotage. Judge Kincaid looked down at him. Mr. Brooks, are you suggesting that your company is so fragile that the departure of one low-level employee, as you called her in your initial filing, caused a total operational collapse? My father opened his mouth, then closed it. He was trapped. If I was just a worker, as he claimed, my leaving shouldn't matter. If my leaving destroyed the company, then I was the architect, not the worker. No, my father stammered. It is not she poisoned the staff. She told them to slack off. Elias cut in. We have a sworn affidavit from your former safety manager, Mr. Kenneth Richards. He states that he resigned because he was ordered to ignore safety violations by your new director of growth, Riley Brooks. Riley, sitting in the back, shrank into his seat. Mr. Richards states that the service failures are due to mechanical negligence, not corporate espionage, Elias said. Elias closed the binder. Your Honor, Brasswood is a sinking ship. They are trying to blame the person who left the lifeboat, rather than the captain who steered them into the iceberg. My client has not solicited a single employee. The employees are leaving because their paychecks are bouncing. That was the dagger. We had found out that morning that payroll had been delayed by 2 days for the warehouse staff. My father slammed his hand on the table. That is a lie. We are solvent. We are having a record quarter. The courtroom went silent. Elias smiled. It was a very small, very dangerous smile. A record quarter, Elias asked softly. Mr. Brooks, in your filing for the temporary injunction, you stated that the company is facing imminent financial ruin due to my client's actions. Now you say you are having a record quarter. Which is it? Are you bankrupt, or are you booming? My father looked at the judge. He looked at Sterling. He realized he had just contradicted his own sworn affidavit. My father stuttered. We are projecting a record quarter if the bleeding stops. Judge Kincaid took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice icy. This court is not a leverage tool for family therapy. You are asking me to restrict a woman's right to earn a living based on the claim that she is stealing trade secrets. Yet, the evidence suggests that your clients are leaving due to performance issues. She looked at me. Ms. Brooks, do you possess any physical or digital copies of Brasswood's client lists or proprietary algorithms? No, Your Honor. I said clearly, I wrote the code, but I left it on their servers. Judge Kincaid nodded. The motion for a temporary restraining order is denied. The preliminary injunction is denied. Ms. Brooks is free to work in her chosen field. However, Ms. Brooks, you are ordered to abide by standard confidentiality regarding specific pricing margins. Do not undercut them using their own math. Win the clients fairly. I will, Your Honor. I said, I already am. It was a win. It wasn't the war, but it was a significant battle. The judge had signaled that she saw through their narrative. She saw a failing business trying to find a scapegoat. We adjourned. The bailiff called. All rise. My father stormed out without looking at me. Riley followed him, looking like a ghost. But my mother waited. She stood by the heavy oak doors, clutching her purse. She waited until Elias had walked ahead to speak with the clerk. She blocked my path. I stopped. We were 2 feet apart. I could smell her perfume. It was the same scent she had worn when I was a child, a scent that used to mean safety. Now it just smelled like denial. Are you happy? She asked. Her voice was low, trembling with a mix of rage and genuine pain. I am not happy. Mother, I said, I am working. You humiliated him, she said. You made him look like a fool in front of a judge. He made himself look like a fool when he lied about the company's finances. I said, he is your father, she hissed. Her eyes welled up. He is 65 years old. Valerie, his blood pressure is through the roof. Do you want him to have a heart attack? Is that what it will take for you to stop this vendetta? Do you want to kill him? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had watched me work myself into the hospital with ulcers and told me I was strong. I looked at the woman who had signed the petition to strip my name from the family trust because her husband told her to. She was using his mortality as a weapon. It was the last resort of a parent who has lost control. If he has a heart attack. Mom, I said, my voice steady but cold. It won't be because of me. It will be because he built a life on debt and deception, and the bill is finally coming due. You are cold, she whispered. You are so cold. I don't even know who you are. I am the person who kept the lights on. I said, and I am the person who is going to turn them off. I stepped around her and walked out into the hallway. My hands were shaking. I put them in my pockets so Elias wouldn't see. I wasn't shaking because of her words. I knew I wasn't killing him. I knew that was manipulation. I was shaking because I knew what was coming next. This hearing was about business. It was about trucks and clients and money. The next hearing, the final trial, was about the petition to disinherit. It was about the fraud. In the next hearing, I wouldn't just be proving that I was a good manager. I would be proving that my father was a criminal. I would be proving that the family trust they were trying to kick me out of was empty, looted by the very man who claimed to protect it. I walked out of the courthouse into the gray afternoon. The wind hit my face. Elias was waiting by the curb. They are going to come at you hard now, Elias said. They are cornered. The offer to settle is going to come in tonight. They will offer to drop the trade secret suit if you drop the fraud investigation. I know. I said, what are we going to do? He asked. I looked at the skyline. We reject it, I said. We go to the final hearing. But Val? Elias warned. Once we play the fraud card, there is no going back. He won't just lose the case. He will lose everything. The reputation he spent 40 years building it will be gone in an hour. I thought about the signature on the loan. I thought about the way he looked at me when he said, you are lucky to have a job. He doesn't have a reputation. Elias, I said, he has a disguise, and I'm tired of helping him wear it. Let's finish this. The night before the final hearing, I realized that I had never actually been a daughter. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the physical debris of my defense. To the outside observer, A family is a biological accident, a safety net of shared DNA and history. It is supposed to be the one place in the world where you do not have to earn your keep. But as I looked at the timeline of my life spread out on the hardwood floor, measured in invoices, performance reviews, and passive-aggressive dinner table comments, I understood the truth. I had been a probationary employee for 34 years, every grade card, every clean room, every extra shift at the warehouse, every time I swallowed my pride to fix a mistake Riley had made. It was all just an attempt to secure a permanent contract that my father never intended to sign. Tomorrow, in courtroom 4B, they were finally going to fire me. The petition to disinherit was the termination letter. They were not just asking the judge to remove me from the will. They were asking for a legal declaration that the bond was severed. They wanted a court order that said I was a stranger. My father's strategy for the final hearing was simple. He wasn't going to argue numbers. He was going to argue morality. He was going to stand up there, looking like the weary patriarch, and tell Judge Kincaid that I was ungrateful. He would say that he gave me everything: an education, a job, a purpose, and that I had repaid him with treachery. He would paint me as the prodigal daughter who returned not to ask for forgiveness, but to burn down the house. It was a good story. It appealed to the old-fashioned values of loyalty and blood. But I had a better story. My story was written in metadata. I picked up the flash drive that Elias and I had spent the last 12 hours analyzing. We had done a deep forensic dive into the digital files Brasswood had carelessly turned over during discovery. They thought they were just handing over PDFs. They didn't realize that every digital file carries a ghost. We found the board minutes that supposedly authorized Riley's promotion and his exorbitant salary. The document was dated 6 months ago. But the metadata, the digital fingerprint embedded in the code, showed that the file was created last Tuesday at 11 o'clock at night. Author Robert Brooks. Last modified by Marcus Consulting. They had manufactured the evidence 3 days after I sued them. Then there was the loan application, the big one, the $500,000 anchor around my neck. I held the physical copy of the guarantee. I had stared at it 100 times. But tonight, under the harsh light of my desk lamp, I looked at it differently. I looked at the signature, Valerie Brooks. It looked like my hand. It had the same slant, the same sharp V. But there was a hesitation in the loop of the B, a microscopic tremor where the pen had paused, just for a fraction of a second, as if the writer was checking their work against a reference. I remembered teaching my father how to forge my signature when I was in college. It was innocent then. I was studying abroad in London for a semester, and I needed him to sign a car insurance renewal back home. I had laughed over the phone, telling him, "Just do the loop big, Dad. Nobody checks." He had practiced it. He had learned it. He hadn't stolen my identity in a moment of desperation 4 years ago. He had kept that skill in his back pocket for a decade, waiting for the moment when my credit score would be more useful than my presence. My phone buzzed on the floor. It was 11:30 at night. It was Sarah, my boss at Stone Harbor. I hesitated. A call this late from a superior is never good news. It is either a catastrophe or a firing. I picked up. "Valerie," Sarah said. Her voice was tight. "I am sorry to call you this late, but you need to see what just went out on the Midwest Logistics Wire." I opened my laptop and navigated to the industry news site. It was a gossip rag for the freight world, but everyone read it. There was a blind item posted 20 minutes ago. Which prominent Chicago logistics family is currently in a legal war with a former executive daughter who was caught selling client lists to a competitor? Sources say the rising star at a rival firm is about to be indicted for corporate espionage. They didn't name me. They didn't have to. Executive daughter. Chicago logistics family. Everyone knew. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was the dirty bomb. They knew they might lose in court tomorrow. So they were trying to kill me in the court of public opinion tonight. They wanted Stone Harbor to see me as radioactive. They wanted to ensure that even if I won the lawsuit, I would have no career to go back to. "Did you steal the lists?" Sarah asked. She had to ask. It was her job. "No," I said. The word was a stone dropping into water. Sarah was silent for a long time. "You have a hearing tomorrow," she said finally. "Yes. Then you better bring back a judgment that clears your name." Valerie. "Because if this lingers, if there is even a whiff of indictment, we have to protect the firm." "I understand," I said. "Good luck," she said, and hung up. I sat there in the dark. The anger that had been fueling me for weeks suddenly evaporated. In its place was a cold, hard clarity. They didn't care. My father didn't care if I worked again. My mother didn't care if my reputation was destroyed. They were willing to burn my future to ash just to keep their secrets hidden in the smoke. I looked at my phone. I scrolled to Riley's name. He was the only one who could stop this. If he testified tomorrow, if he told the judge that he knew the minutes were faked, that he knew Dad was lying about the solvency, it would end. I typed a message. "They are destroying me. Riley, the leak to the wire is going to get me fired. Is this what you wanted?" I watched the 3 little dots appear. He was typing. Then he stopped. Then he typed again. "I can't. Val, I'm sorry. He has the mortgage on my house, too. If he goes down, I lose everything." I stared at the screen. Of course, my father hadn't just enslaved me. He had enslaved Riley, too. He had bought Riley a house, probably with another loan he couldn't afford, and used it as a leash. Riley was a hostage. I was the escapee. I put the phone down. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say to him. He had made his choice. He chose the cage because it was comfortable. I went back to the paperwork. I organized the exhibits. Exhibit A, the fraudulent loan agreement. Exhibit B, the metadata proving the backdated board minutes. Exhibit C, the email from the bank notary, confirming she never met me. Exhibit D, the petition to disinherit. I placed the petition on top. They wanted to disinherit me. Fine. I wasn't going to defend my right to be their daughter. I wasn't going to beg for my share of the family trust. I was going to prove that there was no trust left to inherit. I was going to prove that Robert Brooks had looted his own legacy, pawned his children's futures, and was now trying to legally erase the only witness to his crimes. I didn't sleep. I showered at 4 a.m. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, as if I could wash off the DNA that connected me to them. I put on my suit. It was black, not navy, black. I drove to the courthouse as the sun was coming up over Lake Michigan. The city looked beautiful and indifferent. I met Elias on the steps. He looked tired but focused. He had seen the article on The Wire. "You saw it?" he asked. "I saw it." I said, "It is a desperation move." Elias said, "They are trying to rattle you. They want you to walk in there emotional, screaming, looking unstable." I adjusted my briefcase. "I am not going to scream. Elias, I am done screaming." We walked through security. The metal detector beeped. I took off my watch and put it in the bin. It was a watch my father had given me for my college graduation. I looked at it for a second, then I left it in the bin. I didn't put it back on. We entered the courtroom. They were already there. My father was wearing a 3-piece suit. He looked distinguished. He looked like the victim of a great tragedy. My mother was next to him, wearing black as well, as if she were attending a funeral. My funeral. Riley was in the back row, head down, scrolling on his phone. Mr. Sterling looked confident. He had his moral outrage speech prepared. Judge Kincaid entered. The room stood. "We are here on the petition to disinherit and the counterclaims regarding ownership and fraud." The judge said. Sterling stood up. "Your Honor," he began, "today is a sad day. No parent wants to cut off a child, but we are here to protect the integrity of the Brooks family. The defendant has proven herself to be disloyal, dishonest, and destructive. We ask the court to grant the petition and sever all legal ties." He spoke for 20 minutes. He talked about family values. He talked about legacy. He used words like betrayal and heartbreak. My father nodded along, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. Then it was our turn. Elias stood up. "Your Honor," Elias said, "we do not object to the concept of disinheritance. If Mr. and Mrs. Brooks wish to sever ties with their daughter, that is their prerogative." My father looked up, surprised. He expected a fight. He expected me to beg for the money. However, Elias continued, we argue that the motivation for this petition is not moral, but criminal. We argue that Mr. Brooks is seeking to disinherit Valerie Brooks, not because she is a bad daughter, but because she is the primary guarantor of the debt he is hiding. Sterling jumped up. Objection. Speculation. We have the receipts, Your Honor, Elias said calmly. Call your witness. The judge said, we call Robert Brooks to the stand. My father stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked to the witness stand. He passed by me. I could feel the heat of his anger. He placed his hand on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God, I do, my father said. He sat down. He looked at Elias. He looked ready to fight a lawyer. But Elias didn't ask the first question. He looked at me. Your Honor, Elias said, with the court's permission, Ms. Brooks would like to conduct the cross-examination regarding the internal operations and the specific documents in question. She is the former operations director and has the technical knowledge to address the evidence. The judge looked at me. It was unusual, but not illegal in a civil hearing if I was representing my own interest in the counterclaim. Ms. Brooks, the judge asked, are you prepared? I stood up. My legs felt solid. My heartbeat was slow, heavy, like a war drum. Yes, Your Honor. I walked to the podium. I was 3 feet away from my father. He looked at me. His eyes were hard, daring me to do it, daring me to blow up the family. He thought I wouldn't do it. He thought I was still the little girl who wanted his approval. He thought I would fold to save him, just like I had always done. I placed the stack of papers on the podium. I looked at him. State your name and your position for the record. I said. He sneered slightly. Robert Brooks, CEO and sole owner of Brasswood Exhibit Freight. Sole owner. I asked. Yes, he said. And as the sole owner, you are the only person authorized to sign for commercial loans and lines of credit, yes. I picked up Exhibit A, the loan document. I didn't hand it to him yet. I just held it. Mr. Brooks, I said, in your petition to disinherit me, you claim that I am no longer a child of this family. That is correct, he said coldly. You forfeited that right. I nodded. So, if I am not your child, and I am not an owner, then why is my name listed as the primary guarantor on the $500,000 loan you took out 4 years ago? The room went silent. My father's eyes flickered. He looked at Sterling. Sterling looked confused. I don't know what you're talking about, my father said. I stepped closer. I am talking about the loan you signed when I was in Michigan. I am talking about the identity you stole. I held up the paper. I am going to ask you one question. Robert, I said, and before you answer, I want you to know that the notary, Jennifer Miller, is sitting in the hallway with her lawyer, waiting to testify that she never saw me sign this. His face drained of color. It went gray. Did you forge my signature to save your company? He stared at me. His mouth opened slightly. He looked at the judge. He looked at my mother. My mother had her hand over her mouth. He couldn't say no. If he said no, the notary would come in and send him to prison for perjury. He couldn't say yes. If he said yes, he admitted to fraud, and the disinheritance petition based on my bad character would dissolve instantly. He was trapped in the silence. Say it, I whispered, not into the microphone, but just for him. Say it. The judge leaned forward. Answer the question. Mr. Brooks. My father looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see a giant. I saw a thief in a suit, and I saw the end. The silence in courtroom 4B was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air inside a diving bell at the bottom of the ocean. My father stood in the witness box, his hand gripping the railing so tightly that his knuckles were the color of bone. He looked at the document I was holding, the loan agreement with the forged signature. He looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw him calculate the odds. If he admitted the signature was real, he admitted I was the primary guarantor and effectively the owner of the credit line, which destroyed his claim that I was just a disgruntled employee. If he admitted it was fake, He was confessing to bank fraud in front of a superior court judge. He cleared his throat. It was a wet, rattling sound. "I am the sole owner," he said. His voice was louder than necessary, booming off the wood paneling. "I built Brasswood from the ground up. I put every drop of sweat into that warehouse. Anything that says otherwise is just administrative noise. Paperwork. Administrative noise," I repeated. I turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the plaintiff claims to be the sole owner. He claims I have no standing. He claims I am trying to steal a legacy that belongs entirely to him." I walked back to the defense table and picked up the second binder. It was heavy, but I continued, turning back to my father. "There is a problem with your timeline, Robert, because 4 years ago, you were not eligible to own anything, were you?" I pulled out the credit rejection letter we had subpoenaed. "Is it not true?" I asked, holding the paper up, "that 4 years ago, you were rejected for this capital loan because your personal debt-to-income ratio was 65%, and you had a previous bankruptcy discharge on your record?" Sterling jumped up. "Objection, relevance. Prejudicial. It goes to credibility and ownership, Your Honor." Elias shouted from the table. "Overruled," Judge Kincaid said sharply. She was leaning forward now, her eyes locked on my father. "Answer the question. Mr. Brooks, were you eligible for the loan?" My father's face was slick with sweat. "They have strict guidelines," he stammered. "I needed a partner." "A partner," I said. I stepped closer. "And who was that partner?" "Robert, who was the only person in the family with a Tier 1 credit score and zero debt. Who was the person you needed to pretend was the boss, so the bank would release the funds?" He didn't answer. He couldn't, looking at me. "I will answer for you," I said. I handed a document to the bailiff to give to the judge. "This is the corporate resolution of authority, dated February 12th, 4 years ago." I said, "It was submitted to the bank to secure the $500,000 line of credit that is currently keeping Brasswood alive." I looked at the gallery. I looked at Riley, who was pale as a sheet. I looked at my mother, whose hands were trembling in her lap. "Read the ownership structure on page 2. "Please," I said to my father. He stared at the paper. He wouldn't read it. "Read it," I commanded. My voice cracked like a whip. He looked down, defeated. "Majority controller Valerie Brooks," he whispered, "49% interest. Executive veto power." "And the collateral?" I asked. "The Brooks Family Trust," he mumbled. I turned to the judge. "Your Honor," I said, "they filed a petition to disinherit me from the family trust. They claimed I was unworthy of the family money, but the evidence shows that my father has already pledged that trust as collateral for a loan that I supposedly guaranteed." I paused, letting the reality sink in. "He isn't trying to disinherit me to save the money," I said. "He is trying to disinherit me because if I am the legal beneficiary, I have the right to audit the trust, and if I audit the trust, I will find out that it is empty. He spent it. He gambled it on a company that was failing, and he used my name to sign the check." My mother let out a sound. It was a gasp that turned into a sob. She looked at my father. "Robert," she whispered, you said the trust was safe. You said it was for retirement." My father snapped. "I did it for us," he shouted, slamming his hand on the witness stand. "I did it to save the business. Do you think I wanted to put her in charge? She is a girl, she is a secretary. I needed a name." The courtroom gasped. He had said the quiet part out loud. "I needed a name." I looked at him calmly. "You needed a signature," I said. I picked up the final piece of evidence. "The email. You claimed earlier that this was a legitimate partnership." I said, "But here's an email from you, sent on the night of February 12th, the night the loan was signed." I read from the paper, "Val, I am leaving a stack of insurance renewals on your desk. Sign the tabs. I need them by morning or the fleet isn't covered." "Dad," I looked at the judge. "I was in Michigan that night, Your Honor, dealing with a frozen fleet." He slipped the loan guarantee into a stack of routine insurance forms. He told me I was signing for workman's compensation. He committed fraud in the inducement. He tricked me into guaranteeing a $500,000 debt, and then he spent 4 years gaslighting me into believing I was just a lucky employee. My father was shaking his head. No, no, you knew I did not know. I shouted back, and that is why you want to disown me. Because the bank is calling the loan, and you want to pin the default on me. You want to ruin my credit to save yours? Judge Kincaid banged her gavel. It was a thunderous sound. Enough, she ordered. She looked at my father. Her expression was no longer that of a mediator in a civil dispute. It was the look of a judge who had just found a crime scene in her courtroom. Mr. Brooks, she said, her voice dangerously low. You have just admitted under oath that you manipulated the ownership structure of your company to bypass federal lending regulations. You have admitted to using your daughter's credit profile without her informed consent to secure capital. But my father started. Be quiet, the judge snapped. She picked up the petition to disinherit. She held it up like it was something dirty. You came into my court, she said, asking for a declaratory judgment to sever ties with your daughter on moral grounds. You painted her as a villain. You wasted the court's time with a trade secret lawsuit that was clearly a leverage tactic to silence a whistleblower. She ripped the first page of the petition in half. The petition is denied with prejudice, she ruled. But we are not done. She turned to the bailiff. I am referring the transcript of this hearing to the district attorney's office for review regarding potential bank fraud and perjury. I am also ordering an immediate forensic accounting of the Brooks family trust. My father slumped. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been cut. And regarding the trade secret suit, the judge continued, looking at Sterling, I am dismissing it, and I am awarding all legal fees to the defendant. Mr. Sterling, if I find out you knew about the fraudulent nature of these documents, I will refer you to the Bar Association. Sterling was already packing his briefcase. He was distancing himself from the blast radius. The judge looked at me. Her face softened. Just a fraction. Ms. Brooks, she said, you are free to go. The court recognizes that you are not liable for the debt incurred through fraud. We will issue a court order to the bank to remove your name from the guarantee immediately. Thank you, Your Honor. I said, court is adjourned. The gavel came down. The sound echoed like a gunshot ending a war. My father didn't move. He sat in the witness box, staring at his hands. He looked small. He looked like an old man who had forgotten where he was. My mother stood up. She walked over to him. I thought she was going to comfort him. I thought she was going to play the loyal wife one last time. She stood in front of the railing. You spent it, she asked. Her voice was hollow. The money for the house. The money for Riley. Eleanor, please, my father whispered. Don't speak to me, she said. She turned around. She looked at Riley. Come on, Riley. Drive me home. Riley looked at Dad. Then he looked at me. He looked at the wreckage of the family he had tried so hard to please. He stood up, adjusted his expensive suit, and walked out the door after Mom. He left Dad sitting there alone. I gathered my papers. I put the binders back in my bag. I felt light. I felt weightless. I walked toward the exit. I had to pass the witness stand. My father looked up. His eyes were watery. Valerie, he said. It was a croak. Val, I can fix this. We can appeal. We can refinance. I stopped. I looked at him. There is no we. Robert, I said, but I am your father. He said, no. I said, you are just a bad investment. I finally wrote off. I walked out of the courtroom doors. The hallway was flooded with light. Elias was there, smiling. He held out his hand. We did it, he said. The order is already being typed up. The bank will be notified by noon. You are free. I shook his hand. Thank you. Elias, what will you do now? He asked. Go back to work. I checked my watch. It was 11 o'clock. Yes, I said. I have a logistics meeting at 2. And I need to call Sarah. I need to tell her the good news. I walked out of the courthouse and down the wide stone steps. The wind off Lake Michigan was cold, but it felt clean. It didn't smell like diesel fumes or old lies. It smelled like the city. I took my phone out of my pocket. I saw a notification from the Midwest Logistics Wire. The headline had been updated. Breaking Brasswood freight fraud exposed in court. Daughter exonerated as founder faces criminal probe. I smiled. They had wanted to take my name. They had wanted to erase Valerie Brooks from the record. But as I walked down the street, my heels clicking a steady, confident rhythm on the pavement, I knew the truth. They hadn't erased me. They had forged me. I was Valerie Brooks, and for the first time in my life, that name belonged entirely to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Maya Revenge Stories. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you listening from right now? And do you think Valerie was right to expose her father? Or should she have settled quietly? Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to see justice served.